You know, I don't know about you guys, but if you were to classify today's weather in terms of some form of spicy food, what would that be? That's the question I'd like for you to answer, and also you can answer for the next few days as well as we look at the next upcoming forecast. The time is 4:37 p.m. and it is June 22nd. Welcome to another update of Great Lakes weather amidst a very hot day across southwest Michigan, Indiana, as well as Ohio, including portions of northern lower Michigan as well. It's pretty much extending across the entire lower peninsula at this time. You'd have some pretty robust heat. You have a nice warm air mass that is settled over the region. It's going to last over the area for the next several days too. We're going to bring some hot temperatures, and the humidity is also going to make the feels like reading go very high as well. As a matter of fact, I was looking at my weather station earlier today. It said my feels like reading was almost 109 degrees, which again is a bit above the amount that was put in place for the extreme heat warning that's in effect for southwest Michigan. But needless to say, it is hot. So let's talk about the heat and what's going on with it. So again, warm air mass really settled over the region. We have this nice ridge that's built in that's drawing a lot of heat and humidity from the south, and you have that nice southwesterly flow that's enabling that to continue to kind of surge forward. We do have a nice little breeze in place that's helping keep things a little bit cooler with regards to, I guess, if it was just stagnated air, you'd be baking. But in this case, we have a little bit of a breeze out there that's helping with a little bit. This is the current air temperatures that are expected. And again, here's what we are at right now for Sunday afternoon. You can see temperatures are around the low 90s, which in fact, this is verifying exactly how the Euro is portraying it right now. My temperature outside is 91.8 degrees. So it's sort of following suit with the Euro. So I think the Euro is a good one to go off of here. And again, the Euro is typically a good one to go off of in terms of air temperature. But you can see on Monday, don't really get too much relief. And in fact, the temperature rises even further. Look at out here in northern Illinois. You get temperatures in the mid-upper 90s, as a matter of fact. And you can tell there's a little bit of a boundary that kind of forms here across portions of Wisconsin, Iowa, and then up towards northern lower Michigan later on Monday. That actually could contribute to some severe weather across portions of northern Michigan, including the upper peninsula and lower Michigan. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that as we get into the time frame on Monday. But you can see that boundary kind of stagnates and kind of settles there. And you have cool temperatures in northern lower and the upper peninsula by Tuesday, but on the southern flank of that front, in that boundary, you have temperatures that remain in the 90s. So again, it's really going to be the question, where does that settle and how does that influence your temperatures? You can notice on Wednesday that it's looking a little bit cooler, which at the same time, while it does look a little bit cooler, we are going to be dealing with thunderstorms, showers and thunderstorms pretty much throughout the entirety of this week, starting on Tuesday afternoon into Wednesday. So some of those storms could be strong. It's mainly looking like a damaging wind and hail threat if there's any storms that do tend to get that strong, because really the key issue here is the instability and the heat and humidity that will drive these storms as they make their way through. Not really looking at too much of a tornado threat during this time frame. But again, you can see the heat and humidity sticks around for a while. We still have temperatures going into the upper 80s, still near 90 degrees all the way into Friday. And then even into Saturday, you can see the temperatures get close to 90 across Michigan still as well. So we don't really start to see too much relief until we get into the July time frame based on the Euro. So hot and humid air is here to stay. It's here to stay for quite a while. There will be days where we get cooler temperatures, but it's still going to be dealing with that humid air. In fact, if we take a look at the dew point map here with this setup, and there's our dews right now, as a matter of fact. You can see the dew points are in the low 70s, which again, very moist air out there, and the moist air really stays in place. Even as you spam click across the model runs here, you can see that there's not really too much relief. Your dews remain in the 60s. As we get into early July, you can see that the air does dry out a little bit more, which might provide a little bit of relief, but still, dew points in the low 60s still make it for a hot and humid time frame. But you can see there's going to be a mix of moist air, brief moments where the air dries out, but you still have your dews that will contribute to some still that stickier feeling in the atmosphere, particularly during this next week, though, is the major concern when it comes to humid air. So again, the current things that are in effect, let's take a look at the hazards here that are in place. You can see that there is a heat advisory across the place. You can see that this area in the middle across Indiana, Ohio, and southern Michigan is blank. That is actually because extreme heat warnings are not registered right now in pivotal weather. They have excessive heat warnings in place, but extreme heat warning is in effect for those areas that you can see that are not shaded, surrounded by the heat advisory. So again, that includes Detroit, that includes southern Michigan, northeastern Indiana, northwest Ohio, and then you can see some places all around here still in blank that could be under extreme heat warnings. I know this area is, and I know this area is. So those places will be seeing some very hot humid conditions with heat indexes reaching into the 100s. Speaking of heat indexes, this is what the feels like reading is looking like. You can see this afternoon it's feeling like the 100s. In fact, we got even a little warmer than 101 across portions of Kalamazoo County. We got up to 107 in some places. So you can see that there's not really too much relief coming. You can see that the heat indexes still remain in the 100s in some spots, in the upper 90s, as this hot and humid air stays in place. So it does seem like some of the models here, going back to what was expected for today, I had a reading that was about 6 or 7 degrees above what this was being shown in Kalamazoo County. So there will be some variabilities between warmer and cooler places, and that also has to depend on terrain and the amount of sunshine places get. But you can see that hot and humid conditions stick around pretty much the entirety of the week, and then return even at times during next week too. But it looks like it tends to cool off a little bit as we get into next week, as we see some drier air make its way into the region. So we're watching the heat carefully, because again, it's very important to keep in mind that heat is the #1 leading cause of death in the United States. That's weather related. So it's really important to keep in mind that you need to be drinking plenty of water, have an air conditioned room you can go to, take frequent breaks outside, and just find ways to stay cool in heat like this. Now let's talk about how it's going to impact our weather conditions. So as you can see here, this is Sunday afternoon. We do have some storms that are likely to develop this afternoon across portions of Minnesota. Those likely will have some tornado potential embedded with them. Maybe some of you saw that footage of that tornado that was in South Dakota. That was an intense storm, and again, that's riding along this ridge. And a lot of these storms that are moving along the northern part of the United States are ridge riders, which again, they're riding the high pressure system that's settling over this region that's bringing us that heat. And then this boundary is going to kind of settle over portions of northern lower Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And storms will likely fire off along there. But you can get a sounding out ahead of these storms across southeast Wisconsin. And you can see potential for severe does exist, really because of the Cape. It's really instability focused here. There is speed shear present, but directional shear is very low. SRH is low. I'm not really looking at a tornado threat, and these storms do appear to be elevated. With steepening lapse rates and the amount of energy and the amount of heat and humidity in the atmosphere, it is likely that there will be quite a bit of lightning embedded with these storms as well. So it's going to be good to keep that in mind as these storms develop. And then as we get into Tuesday, you can see storms do develop across portions of Michigan too. And again, when we get heat and humidity like this, there is potential for the models to not really, recognize these scenarios super well. The environment can be a little bit erratic when it comes to storm development, but in terms of severe potential, the damaging wind and hail threat is the primary thing to be concerned about. And again, a lot of that threat does appear to be somewhat more marginal in nature in a lot of places, because again, it's really instability driven at this time. So hail, damaging winds that could be associated with downburst winds, very possible, but as these storms remain somewhat elevated too, that could have an influence. Wednesday might be a day to be a little bit more watchful in terms of severe weather. You do have lower cloud bases, you have a pretty thick amount of instability all the way up to the upper levels of the atmosphere, steep lapse rates, good Cape. SRH is still relatively low, but and your speed and directional shear is actually lower, but at the same time, with the high heat, high humidity that we'll have in place, that will contribute to some storms that will form. So this is at 1 a.m. on Thursday. You can see that storms pretty much develop along this area for quite a bit of time. And depending on how these storms interact with the front, and then where low pressure systems and MCVs begin to form, that's where we'll start to see more enhanced development of severe weather. But you can see that the Cape values out in Illinois get up to 4,000 in some spots, which is again pretty decent Cape and again expected with high heat, high moisture scenarios where you have sunshine. And again, it'll be likely that some storms will have to break through a capping inversion. Capping will be somewhat of an issue at times, but as these systems interact with this environment, it's going to determine the nature and intensity of some of these storms as they evolve. So really, I can't draw fine lines on what will happen with these systems as they make their way through. It's not really a one-size-fits-all situation, and as we get into the long range, it's not really easy to say what's going to happen, so I'm not really going to draw a line on that. We do know is that the SPC has put out some threat hazards or some risk areas for severe weather, and again, Copper Harbor region, western Upper Peninsula, is included in the Day 1 convective outlook for today, and that's associated with that threat for severe weather, including tornadoes, damaging winds, and large hail across Minnesota today. As we get into day 2, that threat shifts eastward, and again, right along where that front's going to kind of settle and kind of stabilize and settle. As we get into later on in the week, slight risk for severe weather, chance for tornadoes, damaging winds, and hail present there. Mainly damaging winds, but tornado threat and hail threat is also present as that front begins to move slowly over the region. And then as we get into day 3 outlook, you see that lower Michigan, north Indiana, northwest Ohio is now under a marginal risk. Not really too much to be determined about that just yet. We still have that upper ridge that's going to settle over the area. So that's going to be the situation that we're going to be dealing with. It will surge north as a warm front late in the day and overnight. So that front's going to kind of station itself there and could lift north and south, and it'll vary based on evolution of things. And then predictability is too low later on. Again, like I said, in these environments, predictability is very difficult with these systems and these patterns. Again, if you get a boundary to settle up in a high temperature, high humidity environment with a little bit of shear, that will drive some storms to become stronger. But again, more looking like those summer thunderstorms that you would generally expect during hot days. And then the CSU MLP is showing the elevated tornado threat for northern Minnesota, and also for hail and damaging winds that could be significant. And then the tornado threat for the CSU MLP, which again is a model conglomeration that kind of determines, it kind of gives an output for threats based on what it sees, and it uses an algorithm to develop that. But you have your tornado threat that's centralized across portions of the Upper Peninsula, which includes Grand Marais, areas west of St. Ignace, and then you have their hail and then your damaging wind threat, which primarily centralizes itself in eastern Wisconsin once again. So as you go forward into the day 3 to 8 range, notice what we have here. We have a low threat for severe weather showing itself for every day in Michigan based on the CSU MLP. So again, there is going to be some isolated storms probably throughout this next week that will become strong to severe across the Great Lakes region. The question is, how will they evolve and where will they form? And generally, it's going to be very hard to give an exact depiction of how that's going to unfold. So we're not really going to draw lines on that just yet. Looking at the 18ZH and what's going to happen overnight this evening, it's depicting the storms developing on Monday across portions of southeastern Wisconsin. You get a sounding out ahead of those for that slight risk. You can see severe potential. SRH is there, but it's low. CAPE is around 3,000 across eastern Wisconsin. And then you go into portions of Michigan as those storms continue to make their way through later on in the evening. And it actually shows a marginal tornado potential with increased SRH. And that's kind of following suit with CSU MLP and what the SBC is saying as well. Then as we get into Tuesday, you can notice that that settles over this region. We don't have enough data to go that far out just yet. But if you get a sounding by 1 p.m., you can see marginal severe potential. Dew points are in the 60s. You have kind of a broader gradient between the dews and the temperatures here. Cape values around 2,000. Very steep lapse rates, elevated cloud bases that will likely change as we get later on into the afternoon, but it's still a lot of variables to play with in regards to these forecasts. But the tornado threat's down. Damaging winds and hail are a low chance, but regardless, there will be thunderstorms quite a bit during the week next week. So it's a lot to pay attention to, a lot to monitor. And again, I am going to be doing campus next week in the grueling heat. Prayers for safety for that are appreciated. But we will be we'll probably set up a stationary camera if there's any severe storms that roll through our area. Kind of take a look at those as they move through. For now, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and stay updated. And also check out Michigan Storm Chasers, who will be active during any severe thunderstorm warnings that occur during the week next week. So, thanks for watching, everybody. It's a pleasure chasing alongside you, and I'll see you all later.